The moment Tessa Rose stepped through the doors of the Lucky Strike Saloon, she knew her life had changed forever. Not for the better. The smell of whiskey and tobacco hung heavy in the air as she clutched her mother's prescription in her trembling hand. It was 1878, and Tonopah, Nevada, was still just a dusty mining settlement, not yet the silver boomtown it would later become. For a 20-year-old woman with limited prospects and a desperately ill mother, the choices were few. "You must be the new girl," a woman with rouge-painted cheeks and tired eyes said, looking Tessa up and down. "Jeremiah said you'd be coming by. I'm Vivian, the madam here." Tessa's throat constricted. "Yes, madam, I'm Tessa. Tessa Rose. Pretty name for a pretty girl. The men will like that." Vivian gestured toward the bar where several miners were already drinking despite the early hour. "You'll serve drinks for now. Maybe dance a little. The other services we can discuss later." Tessa nodded, though her stomach twisted painfully. "My mother needs medicine." "I was told I could get an advance on my wages." Vivian's expression softened momentarily. "Jeremiah mentioned something about that. I'll have him give you some money after your shift." She handed Tessa a tattered dress in a gaudy red color. "Put this on. Your shift starts now." As Tessa changed in the small back room, tears threatened to fall. Her father had died in a mining accident 3 years prior, leaving them with nothing but debt. Then her mother's consumption had worsened, requiring expensive treatments they couldn't afford. With no other options in a town where women could be teachers, seamstresses, or saloon girls, Tessa had chosen the path that paid enough to keep her mother alive. For 2 months, Tessa served drinks at the Lucky Strike, enduring wandering hands and crude propositions. She'd managed to avoid the other services Vivian had mentioned, but knew her reprieve wouldn't last forever. Each night, she returned to their small cabin on the edge of town, where her mother, Elizabeth Rose, grew weaker despite the medicine Tessa could now afford. It was an unusually busy Tuesday when the stranger walked in. Unlike the rough miners and ranch hands who frequented the saloon, this man carried himself with quiet confidence. His clothes were trail-worn but clean dark trousers, a blue shirt, and a dust-covered hat that he removed upon entering, revealing thick black hair. He took a seat at an empty table in the corner, away from the rowdier patrons. "Whiskey, please," he said when Tessa approached his table. His voice was deep but gentle, his eyes a startling blue against his sun-browned skin. "Yes, sir," Tessa replied, hurrying to fetch his drink. When she returned, he thanked her, something few men bothered to do, and introduced himself. "Isaac Xavier. Just passing through on my way to my ranch north of here." "Welcome to Tonopah, Mr. Xavier," Tessa said politely, already turning to leave. "Miss," he called after her, "you don't seem to belong here." Tessa stiffened. "I work here same as anyone." Isaac's eyes were kind, not judgmental. "That's not what I meant." Before she could respond, a commotion broke out at the bar. 2 miners were arguing over a card game, and within seconds, punches were thrown. As glasses shattered and men shouted, Tessa found herself shoved backward by the surging crowd. Strong hands steadied her. Isaac had risen from his seat and pulled her away from the chaos. "Thank you," she gasped, heart pounding. Sheriff Morgan Cooper burst through the doors, his deputies behind him. "Break it up, you fools. Take it outside or spend the night in my jail." The miners reluctantly separated, and the saloon gradually returned to its normal level of boisterous activity. Through it all, Isaac Xavier watched the proceedings with calm detachment. "Does this happen often?" he asked Tessa. "Often enough," she admitted. "The miners work hard and play harder." Isaac nodded thoughtfully, then finished his whiskey. As he stood to leave, he placed a generous tip on the table. "Be careful, Miss Rose, Tessa Rose, Miss Rose." He tipped his hat. "Perhaps I'll see you again." True to his word, Isaac returned the next evening, again choosing the quiet corner table. This time, he nursed his whiskey slowly, watching as Tessa moved between tables. When the piano player struck up a lively tune, several men called for Tessa to dance. "Dance for us, pretty girl." "Show us those ankles, Tessa." Vivian appeared beside Tessa, whispering sharply, "Dance with Peterson. He's a big spender." Reluctantly, Tessa allowed the middle-aged miner to pull her into an awkward waltz, his hands wandering lower than proper. From the corner of her eye she saw Isaac watching, his expression unreadable. Later, when she brought him a second whiskey, he asked, "How long have you worked here, Miss Rose?" "2 months, Mr. Xavier." "And before that?" Tessa hesitated. "My father was a miner. After he died, I took in washing and mending, but it wasn't enough." "For your mother's medicine," Isaac said quietly. Tessa stared at him in surprise. "How did you know? Small towns have few secrets. I asked around about you." At her alarmed expression, he added, "Only out of concern. You seem different from the other girls here." "I don't need your concern or judgment, Mr. Xavier," Tessa said stiffly, turning to go. "I'm not judging you," Isaac called after her. "I'm offering you a job." Tessa froze, then slowly turned back. "What kind of job?" "A respectable one. My ranch needs a housekeeper. The pay is good, better than what you make here, I'd wager. And you'd have your own cabin on the property." Tessa's mind raced. "My mother, there's room for her too. The mountain air might do her good." Hope flickered briefly before suspicion took its place. "Why would you offer this to a stranger? A saloon girl at that?" Isaac's gaze was steady. "Because I need a housekeeper and you need a way out. It's as simple as that." "Nothing is ever that simple, Mr. Xavier." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "Perhaps not, but my offer stands. Think about it." For the rest of her shift, Tessa could think of little else. A respectable position, better pay, a place for her mother away from the dusty town that aggravated her cough. It seemed too good to be true. And in Tessa's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. When she returned home that night, she found her mother awake and struggling to breathe. "Mama!" Tessa rushed to her side, helping her sit up and pouring a glass of water. "Here, drink this." Elizabeth Rose took small sips, her once beautiful face now gaunt and pale. "You're late tonight," she whispered. "Busy at the saloon," Tessa said, the familiar shame washing over her. She'd never told her mother exactly what her job entailed, but Elizabeth wasn't a fool. "You shouldn't be there," Elizabeth said, as she always did. "We need the money, Mama. Doctor Pearson says the new treatment is helping." Her mother sighed, her breath rattling in her chest. "At what cost to you, my darling?" Tessa thought of Isaac's offer. "Actually, Mama, I might have found something else. A position as housekeeper at a ranch north of here." Elizabeth's eyes brightened. "A respectable position. Oh, Tessa, that would be wonderful." He said you could come too. There's a cabin for us. Who is offering this?" "A rancher named Isaac Xavier. He's been to the saloon a couple of times." Her mother's expression grew worried. "A man from the saloon offering you work at his isolated ranch. Tessa, you must be careful. Men can have expectations." "I know, Mama. I haven't accepted yet. I'll find out more about him first." The next day, before her shift, Tessa visited Sheriff Cooper at his office. "Isaac Xavier." The sheriff rubbed his graying mustache. "Decent fellow. Bought the old Peterson place about 2 years ago and turned it around. Raises some of the finest horses in the territory." "Is he trustworthy?" Tessa asked hesitantly. Sheriff Cooper's eyes softened with understanding. "He's not the type to take advantage, if that's what you're asking. Lost his wife and child to fever some years back in California. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair in his business dealings. Employs a couple of ranch hands, a cook Mexican fellow named Miguel and until recently an older woman as housekeeper." She moved east to be with her daughter's family. Tessa nodded slowly. Thank you, Sheriff. He offered you a position out there. Yes, for me and my mother. Sheriff Cooper nodded approvingly. You could do a lot worse, Miss Rose. A lot worse than what you're doing now, if you don't mind my saying. That evening, Isaac was at his usual table. As Tessa approached with his whiskey, she noticed he'd brought something with him, a small leather-bound book. Good evening, Mr. Xavier. Miss Rose. He accepted the drink with a nod. Have you considered my offer? I have. Tessa took a deep breath. I'd like to know more about the position, the duties, the pay, and your expectations. Isaac gestured to the chair opposite him. Please, sit for a moment. Tessa glanced nervously toward Vivian, who was busy with a rowdy group of cowboys at the bar. She quickly sat down. The duties are what you'd expect, Isaac said. Keeping the main house clean, laundry, some meal preparation, although Miguel does most of the cooking. The pay is $30 a month, plus room and board for you and your mother. Tessa couldn't hide her surprise. It was nearly twice what she made at the saloon, even on good nights. As for my expectations, Isaac continued, I expect honest work and respect for my property. Nothing more. You're offering a lot to someone you barely know. Isaac's eyes grew distant. I know what it's like to be desperate, Miss Rose, and I believe in second chances. He pushed the book toward her. I brought this for your mother. Miguel's wife was ill with consumption before she passed. This book of herbal remedies helped ease her suffering. Tessa stared at the book, then back at Isaac. Why are you being so kind? Perhaps I'm not as kind as you think. I need a housekeeper and you need a new situation. His voice softened. Or perhaps I see something worth saving. Their conversation was interrupted by Vivian's sharp voice. Tessa, table 4 needs drinks. I should go, Tessa said, standing quickly. Isaac nodded. I'll be leaving town tomorrow morning. If you decide to accept, I'll be at the general store at 8 o'clock. That night, Tessa shared everything with her mother, including the book of remedies. He seems like a good man, Elizabeth said after examining the book carefully. And Sheriff Cooper vouched for him. But we'd be isolated out there, dependent on his goodwill, if things went wrong. Things could go wrong here too, darling. Elizabeth took her daughter's hand. You can't keep working at that saloon. Sooner or later, Vivian will demand more from you than serving drinks. Tessa knew her mother was right. Just yesterday, Vivian had hinted that Tessa needed to start entertaining gentlemen privately if she wanted to keep her position. We could try it, Tessa said slowly. If it doesn't work out, we can come back to town. That's my brave girl. Elizabeth smiled, though it quickly turned into a coughing fit. As Tessa helped her mother through the attack, her decision crystallized. They needed this chance, perhaps their only chance. The next morning, Tessa and Elizabeth stood outside Parker's general store, their meager belongings packed in 2 small trunks. Isaac arrived punctually, driving a sturdy wagon. Miss Rose, he greeted Tessa, then tipped his hat to her mother. Mrs. Rose, I'm pleased to meet you. I hope you're feeling well enough for the journey. Well enough, Mr. Xavier, thank you, Elizabeth replied, studying him intently. It's about 3 hours to the ranch, Isaac explained as he loaded their trunks. He helped Elizabeth into the wagon with gentle care, ensuring she was comfortable on the padded bench seat. I've prepared the cabin for you. It's small but sound. As they left Tonopah behind, Tessa felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. The town had been their home since she was a child, yet it now represented hardship and shame. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. The journey took them north through sage-dotted valleys and into pine-covered foothills. Elizabeth dozed against Tessa's shoulder while Isaac pointed out landmarks and spoke of the year's weather patterns. His manner was polite but reserved, giving no hint of ulterior motives. There it is, he finally said, gesturing ahead as they crested a hill. Xavier Ranch. Tessa's breath caught. Below them stretched a verdant valley with a clear stream running through it. A white-painted ranch house stood proudly on a gentle rise, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and pastures where horses grazed. In the distance, cattle dotted the hillsides. "It's beautiful," Elizabeth murmured, having awakened at Isaac's words. "It's taken work to make it so," Isaac replied, a note of pride in his voice. "The previous owner let it go to ruin." He guided the wagon down the hill and along a well-maintained road toward the main house. A man emerged from one of the outbuildings, stocky, dark-haired, with a weathered face. "Miguel," Isaac called out, "come meet our new housekeeper and her mother." Miguel approached, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Welcome to Xavier Ranch, señores. My wife, Consuela, has prepared your cabin and a meal for you." A small, plump woman appeared on the porch of a nearby cabin, waving cheerfully. Tessa waved back, surprised. Sheriff Cooper had mentioned Miguel but said his wife had passed away. Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. "Miguel remarried last year. Consuela is a blessing to us all. She helps with cooking when we have extra hands during roundup." The cabin assigned to Tessa and Elizabeth was simple but comfortable, with 2 proper beds, a small cooking area, a table with chairs, and a fireplace. Windows on either side allowed for cross-ventilation, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the table. "This is lovely," Elizabeth said, sitting on one of the beds to catch her breath. "I'm glad you approve," Isaac said from the doorway. "Rest today and tomorrow. Tessa can start her duties the day after." Once he'd gone, Elizabeth gave her daughter a significant look. "He seems a decent man," as the sheriff said. "Yes," Tessa agreed cautiously. "But it's early yet, Mama." The first weeks at Xavier Ranch passed quickly as Tessa settled into her new role. The main house was spacious but not extravagant, 8 rooms in total, all of which Tessa kept meticulously clean. Isaac's private quarters consisted of a bedroom and small study, which she tidied only when he was out working with the horses. Isaac himself remained something of a mystery. He was unfailingly polite, but maintained a certain distance. He rose before dawn and often worked until sunset, taking his meals at irregular hours. Sometimes Tessa would find him in the study late at night, poring over ledgers or reading one of the many books that lined his shelves. Elizabeth's health, meanwhile, showed subtle improvement. The mountain air was clearer than Tonopah's perpetual dust, and Consuela prepared special teas using recipes from the book Isaac had given them. Though still frail, Elizabeth's coughing fits became less frequent, and she gained enough strength to sit outside for short periods. "Your mother is looking better," Isaac commented one evening as Tessa served his dinner, a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread. "She is, thank you." Tessa hesitated, then added, "The Book of Remedies has been very helpful. Consuela has been teaching me to prepare the teas." Isaac nodded, his expression briefly darkening. "I'm glad it's of use to someone. May I ask you something, Mr. Xavier?" He looked up, surprised. "Of course." "The sheriff mentioned you lost your wife and child. I'm very sorry for your loss." Isaac was silent for so long that Tessa regretted her question. Finally, he said, "It was 5 years ago. Caroline, my wife, and our son, Thomas. He was just 2. He cleared his throat. "The fever took them both within days of each other." "I can't imagine such pain," Tessa said softly. "It changes a person." Isaac's gaze met hers, startlingly vulnerable. "Is that what you wanted to know, Miss Rose? I didn't mean to pry. I wanted to understand you better." "And do you understand me better now?" "Perhaps a little," Tessa admitted. "You built all this afterward, didn't you, after losing them?" Isaac nodded slowly. "I couldn't stay in California. Too many memories. I wandered for a while, then found this place. It needed as much healing as I did. The conversation shifted something between them, a subtle warming that made Tessa more aware of him as a man rather than merely an employer. She found herself noticing details. The way sunlight caught in his black hair, revealing strands of copper. How his hands, though calloused from ranch work, moved with unexpected grace. The rare but transformative nature of his smile. One afternoon, as Tessa hung laundry on the line behind the house, she heard the thundering of hooves. Isaac appeared on a magnificent black stallion, guiding the animal through a series of precise movements. Horse and rider moved as one, a demonstration of mutual trust and understanding that left Tessa breathless. When Isaac dismounted and led the horse to the water trough, he spotted Tessa watching. "This is Midnight," he said, patting the stallion's neck. "The most stubborn creature I've ever met, but worth every moment of frustration." "He's beautiful," Tessa said, approaching cautiously. "He won't bite. Here." Isaac took her hand and placed it on Midnight's nose. The horse's breath was warm against her palm, his dark eyes intelligent and assessing. "I've never been this close to such a fine horse before," Tessa admitted. "You ride," she shook her head. "My father taught me the basics as a child, but it's been years. I could teach you if you'd like." Isaac's offer seemed to surprise him as much as it did Tessa. "I'd enjoy that," she said, smiling up at him. Their first riding lesson took place the following Sunday afternoon. Isaac chose a gentle mare named Butterfly for Tessa, patiently refreshing her memory on proper mounting, posture, and basic commands. As they rode side by side through a meadow golden with late summer grass, Tessa felt a freedom she hadn't experienced in years. "You're a natural," Isaac said approvingly as she urged Butterfly into a trot. "The horse is doing most of the work," Tessa laughed, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "That's the secret of good riding, a partnership." Isaac's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Most people try to dominate the horse. The best riders work with them instead." They paused at the edge of a small pond where wild ducks swam. Dismounting, they let the horses drink while they sat on a fallen log. "May I ask you something in return, Miss Rose?" Isaac said after a comfortable silence. "It seems only fair. Your father was a miner. What happened to him?" Tessa's smile faded. "There was a cave-in at the Silver Crown mine 3 years ago. Papa and 4 other men were trapped. By the time they reached them, it was too late." "I'm sorry," Isaac said quietly. "It must have been difficult for you and your mother." "It was. The mining company gave us a small settlement, but it didn't last long. Then, when Mama fell ill." Tessa trailed off, not wanting to revisit those desperate days. "And there was no other family to help, none close enough to matter. Papa had a brother in Pennsylvania, but we lost touch years ago." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "Life has dealt you difficult cards, yet you've played them with grace." Tessa looked at him in surprise. "I wouldn't call working in a saloon grace. You did what was necessary to care for your mother. There's dignity in that, regardless of what others might think." His understanding, free of judgment, touched Tessa deeply. "Thank you for saying that, and for giving us this chance." "The chance was mine as well," Isaac said, his voice low. "This place was empty before you came." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken meaning. Tessa found herself studying the planes of his face, the intensity of his blue eyes, the slight curve of his mouth. For an instant, she thought he might move closer, but instead he stood and offered his hand to help her up. "We should head back. Your mother will be wondering where you are." The riding lessons continued each Sunday, becoming a highlight of Tessa's week. As summer gave way to fall, the landscape transformed into a canvas of gold, red, and orange. Isaac proved to be a patient teacher, and Tessa a quick learner. Soon she was confident enough to join him on longer rides, exploring the furthest reaches of the ranch. Elizabeth watched this developing friendship with quiet approval. "He looks at you when you're not watching," she told Tessa one evening as they sat by their cabin's fireplace. "Mama, don't start matchmaking," Tessa warned, though her heart quickened at the thought. "I'm merely observing. And what I observe is a good man who's been alone too long, and my beautiful daughter who deserves happiness. He's my employer. For now." Elizabeth smiled mysteriously and returned to her knitting. October brought cooler temperatures and preparations for winter. The ranch hands, under Isaac's direction, repaired buildings, stored hay, and moved cattle to lower pastures. Tessa and Consuela preserved vegetables from the garden and made jams from late berries. Even Elizabeth contributed, knitting warm scarves and socks for everyone on the ranch. One crisp morning, Isaac announced he needed to make a trip to Tonopah for supplies. "I'll be gone 2 days," he told Tessa as she served his breakfast. "Is there anything you or your mother need from town?" "Just some thread for Mama's knitting, if you don't mind," Tessa replied. "And perhaps some peppermint for her tea. Consider it done." He hesitated, then added, "I'll also stop by to see Dr. Pearson. Perhaps he can recommend something more for your mother's condition." Tessa's throat tightened with gratitude. "That's very thoughtful of you." After Isaac departed, Tessa went about her duties with a strange sense of absence, as if the house itself noticed his missing presence. When she entered his study to dust, she paused at his desk, looking at the neat stacks of papers and books. A partially written letter caught her eye, addressed to someone in San Francisco regarding horse breeding, along with a small framed photograph she'd never noticed before. Curiosity overcame propriety, and she picked it up. A young woman with a gentle smile held a tow-headed toddler on her lap. Caroline and Thomas Isaac's lost family. Tessa carefully replaced the photograph, a complex emotion stirring in her chest. No wonder he kept a part of himself guarded. The loss was still there, preserved in that silver frame. When Isaac returned from Tonopah, he brought not only the requested items but also a surprise, a proper wheelchair for Elizabeth. "Mr. Xavier, this is too generous," Elizabeth protested as Miguel and Isaac carried it into the cabin. "Nonsense," Isaac replied. "Dr. Pearson suggested you need more fresh air and sunshine. This will allow you to move around without tiring yourself." "I don't know how to thank you," Tessa said, deeply moved by his thoughtfulness. "Your mother's improving health will be thanks enough." His gaze lingered on Tessa's face. "Dr. Pearson also gave me this." He handed her a small package. "A new treatment from back east. He says it might help with the coughing." That evening, after Elizabeth had retired, Tessa walked to the main house to thank Isaac properly. She found him on the porch, smoking a pipe and gazing at the star-filled sky. "May I join you?" she asked. He stood immediately. "Of course." He offered her a chair and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds: distant coyotes, the soft nickering of horses in the barn, the rustle of pine trees in the breeze. "I wanted to thank you again," Tessa finally said, "for everything you've done for us." "You've earned it with your hard work," Isaac replied. "The house has never been so well kept. It's more than that, though. You've been kind in ways you didn't need to be." Isaac tapped out his pipe, considering his words. "When I brought you here, I thought I was offering you salvation. I didn't realize you might be offering the same to me." Tessa's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" This ranch was just a place before land and buildings and animals. Important, yes, but not. He searched for the right word. Not alive. "You and your mother have brought something back that I thought was gone forever." "What's that?" "Hope," he said simply. The possibility of happiness. Their eyes met in the soft lantern light, and Tessa felt something shift irreversibly between them. No longer employer and employee, but a man and a woman drawn together by mutual respect and growing affection. "Isaac," she said, using his given name for the first time. "I saw the photograph in your study. I wasn't snooping, I promise. It's all right," he interrupted gently. "You deserve to know about my past if we're to have any kind of future. Is that what you want? A future that includes me?" Instead of answering directly, Isaac reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and slightly calloused against hers. "I never expected to feel this way again. After Caroline and Thomas died, I thought that part of me was buried with them. I understand if you're not ready. It's not about being ready," he said. "It's about being brave enough to risk loss again, and I find, quite unexpectedly, that I am." Tessa's breath caught as Isaac leaned forward, hesitated briefly, then pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle and questioning at first, then deepened as she responded. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she leaned into his touch, her heart racing. When they finally pulled apart, Tessa saw vulnerability and hope mingled in Isaac's eyes. "I care for you, Tessa Rose, more than I thought possible." "And I for you," she whispered, still feeling the warmth of his lips on hers. Their relationship blossomed as autumn deepened toward winter. While maintaining propriety, Tessa continued her duties as housekeeper, and Isaac never visited her cabin alone. They found moments to be together. Walks at dusk, rides on Sunday afternoons, evenings by the fire discussing books, or simply enjoying each other's company. Elizabeth watched with satisfaction, her health continuing to improve with the new medication and mountain air. By November, she was strong enough to sit outside for extended periods in her wheelchair, wrapped in blankets against the chill, observing the ranch's activities. "He'll ask you to marry him soon," she predicted one evening as they prepared for bed. "I've seen the way he looks at you." "Mama," Tessa protested, though a blush heated her cheeks. "Don't pretend you haven't thought of it," Elizabeth teased. "I've raised no fools." Tessa had indeed thought of it, lying awake at night remembering Isaac's kisses, imagining a life as his wife rather than his employee. The idea both thrilled and frightened her. What if she wasn't enough? What if he eventually regretted choosing a former saloon girl? Her fears were tested when unexpected visitors arrived at the ranch in early December, a wealthy horse breeder named Harlan Drummond and his daughter, Victoria. They'd traveled from Sacramento to discuss purchasing one of Isaac's prized stallions for breeding. Victoria Drummond was everything Tessa was not: refined, educated, clearly from a good family. With her fashionable clothes and perfectly coiffed golden hair, she made Tessa acutely aware of her own simple dresses and practical braids. "Miss Drummond will be staying in the guest room," Isaac informed Tessa the morning of their arrival. "Her father will take the small bedroom off the study." "I'll prepare the rooms immediately," Tessa replied, keeping her voice professional despite the twist of jealousy in her stomach. The Drummonds arrived that afternoon in an impressive carriage. Victoria, about Tessa's age but worlds apart in experience, swept into the house with the confidence of someone accustomed to the finest things in life. "What a charming home you have, Mr. Xavier," she said, looking around with polite interest. "So rustic." "Thank you, Miss Drummond. Tessa will show you to your room." Isaac's tone was cordial but reserved. Victoria's gaze flicked to Tessa, assessing and dismissive in an instant. "Thank you." "Tessa, was it? Is that my luggage being brought in? Do be careful with the leather valise, it's from Paris." For the next 3 days, Tessa maintained her professional demeanor while serving meals, cleaning rooms, and preparing baths for their guests. She watched as Victoria made obvious attempts to engage Isaac's interest, touching his arm when speaking to him, laughing too loudly at his mild jokes, finding excuses to seek his company. "She's quite taken with you," Harlan Drummond commented to Isaac over brandy one evening, loudly enough for Tessa to hear as she cleared the dinner dishes. "Victoria has many suitors in Sacramento, but she seems particularly impressed with your operation here." "Your daughter is charming," Isaac replied neutrally, "but I'm afraid she'd find ranch life quite different from city living." "Nonsense. The girl has an adventurous spirit, and a match between our families would be advantageous my breeding stock with your training methods." Isaac caught Tessa's eye briefly before responding. "I prefer to keep business and personal matters separate, Mr. Drummond." On their final evening, Victoria cornered Tessa in the kitchen as she prepared a special dessert for the farewell dinner. "You're in love with him, aren't you?" Victoria asked bluntly. Tessa nearly dropped the bowl she was holding. "I don't know what you mean, Miss Drummond. Please, it's painfully obvious. The way you look at him when you think no one's watching." Victoria leaned against the counter, studying Tessa with cool appraisal. "Does he return your feelings, or are you simply pining for your employer?" Tessa's cheeks burned, but she kept her composure. "My relationship with Mr. Xavier is not your concern." "Oh, but it is. You see, my father is determined to create a business alliance with Mr. Xavier, and marriage would seal that nicely. I'm not opposed to the idea. Isaac is handsome and his ranch has potential. With proper management and my father's connections, it could become quite impressive." "And what does Mr. Xavier think of these plans?" Tessa asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Victoria smiled thinly. "Men can be persuaded, especially when significant financial advantages are involved. You're merely the housekeeper, after all. A pretty distraction, perhaps, but hardly a suitable wife for a man of ambition." Her words struck at Tessa's deepest insecurities. Was that how Isaac saw her as well? A distraction until someone more appropriate came along. Before Tessa could respond, Consuela entered the kitchen, giving Victoria a stern look. "Miss Drummond, your father is looking for you." Victoria straightened, her smile turning saccharine. "Of course. Thank you for the illuminating conversation, Tessa." After she left, Consuela patted Tessa's arm. "Do not listen to that one. She has a snake's tongue." "But what if she's right?" Tessa whispered, blinking back tears. "What if I am just a distraction?" Consuela shook her head firmly. "I have worked for many men, Señorita. I know the look of one in love. Señor Isaac loves you. This is truth." Tessa wanted desperately to believe her, but doubt had taken root. That night, she served dinner with mechanical efficiency, avoiding Isaac's questioning glances. After the meal, she pleaded a headache and hurried back to her cabin. The Drummonds departed the next morning. Tessa, still uncertain and hurt, sent Consuela to serve breakfast, claiming her mother needed her assistance. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that Isaac came to the cabin, concern evident in his expression. "Is your mother worse?" he asked immediately. "No, she's resting comfortably," Tessa replied, stepping outside to speak with him privately. "I'm sorry for not explaining my absence. Are you unwell?" "You seemed troubled last night." Tessa took a deep breath. "Miss Drummond made it clear that her father hopes for a match between you two." Isaac's eyebrows rose. "Did she?" "Well, Mr. Drummond certainly hinted at it, but I made no encouragement. She also suggested that I was unsuitable for you, given my background and position." Understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes, followed by a flash of anger. "And you believed her?" "I don't know what to believe," Tessa admitted, hating the tremor in her voice. "You've been kind and generous, and I know you care for me. But she's not wrong about the differences between us. I was a saloon girl, Isaac. I have no education, no family connections, nothing to offer someone like you except your heart, Isaac interrupted, stepping closer. Which is all I want, Tessa. Do you think I care about Victoria Drummond's connections or her father's money? I built this ranch with my own 2 hands after losing everything that mattered. What matters to me now is not social standing or business advantages, it's finding peace and happiness again. And I've found that with you. Tessa wanted to believe him, but Victoria's poisonous words had found their mark. How can you be sure? We've known each other such a short time. I knew Caroline for 2 months before I asked her to marry me, Isaac said quietly. When it's right, you know it, and it's right, Tessa. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. I've been carrying this for a week, waiting for the right moment. I suppose this is as good as any. Tessa's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful gold ring with a small pearl. I'm not offering you a position as my housekeeper anymore, Isaac said, his voice husky with emotion. I'm offering you a position as my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, should we be so blessed. I'm offering you my name, my ranch, and most importantly, my heart. Will you accept? Tears filled Tessa's eyes as the last of her doubts melted away. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no room for uncertainty. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Tessa Rose. No more doubts, please. I love you too, she replied, feeling as though her heart might burst with happiness. And I promise no more doubts. They shared the news with Elizabeth immediately, who received it with tearful joy and a knowing smile. About time, she said, embracing Isaac. Welcome to our family, son. News of their engagement spread quickly through the small ranch community. Miguel and Consuela organized an impromptu celebration dinner, complete with music and dancing in the ranch house's main room. The ranch hands, all fond of Tessa, offered congratulations and good-natured teasing to Isaac about his good fortune. As Christmas approached, wedding preparations began in earnest. Tessa and Elizabeth traveled to Tonopah with Isaac to purchase fabric for a wedding dress, which Elizabeth insisted on sewing despite her limited strength. It's not every day a mother gets to make her daughter's wedding dress, she said firmly when Tessa protested that it was too much work. In town, they encountered curious glances and whispered comments. Tessa held her head high, Isaac's hand steady on her arm as they visited the general store where she'd once stood with all her possessions, hoping for a better life. Tessa Rose, a familiar voice called as they exited the store. Vivian, the saloon madam, stood across the street, her expression unreadable. Tessa hesitated, then said to Isaac, "Would you mind if I spoke with her for a moment?" "Of course not," he replied, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "I'll wait with your mother." Crossing the street, Tessa approached her former employer with a mix of apprehension and resolve. "Hello, Vivian." "Well, don't you look fine," Vivian said, eyeing Tessa's new wool coat and neat appearance. "Word is you're marrying that rancher." "Yes, in the spring," Vivian nodded slowly. "Good for you, girl. You got out clean. Thank you for understanding when I left so suddenly." "Wasn't much choice, was there?" Vivian's hard exterior softened slightly. "Truth be told, I'm glad you found something better. You never belonged in my place." The acknowledgement, coming from Vivian of all people, brought unexpected tears to Tessa's eyes. "I hope you're well, Vivian." "Well enough." She glanced over at Isaac, who was helping Elizabeth examine some ribbon. "He treats you right, he does. He's a good man." "Then you hold on to him, girl. Men like that don't come around often." With a brief nod, Vivian turned and walked back toward the Lucky Strike, her gaudy skirts swishing in the dust. As they drove back to the ranch that afternoon, Tessa found herself reflecting on the strange circle her life had taken. From desperate saloon girl to respected future wife of a rancher, all in the span of half a year. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "How much has changed," she replied honestly. "How fortunate I am." "We both are," he said, his smile warming her more effectively than the blanket wrapped around their legs. Winter settled over the valley, bringing snow that transformed the ranch into a pristine wonderland. Christmas was a joyful affair, with gifts exchanged and a feast prepared by Consuela that brought everyone together around one long table. Isaac presented Tessa with a beautiful leather-bound journal, while she gave him a hand-knitted scarf that she and Elizabeth had worked on secretly. The most touching gift, however, came from Elizabeth to both of them, a quilt she had pieced together from scraps of meaningful fabric, including a small square from Tessa's father's shirt and another from the red saloon dress Tessa had worn on her first day at the Lucky Strike. "To remember where you've been," Elizabeth explained as Tessa traced the patches with trembling fingers, "and to remind you that every experience, good or bad, has led you to each other." January brought heavy snow and quiet evenings by the fire. Isaac began teaching Tessa about the business aspects of running the ranch ledgers, contracts, breeding records. A true partnership, he called it, valuing her quick mind and practical suggestions. February brought unexpected news. Dr. Pearson, making his monthly visit to check on Elizabeth, examined Tessa as well after she mentioned feeling unusually tired. "Well, Mrs. Xavier to be," he said with a smile after his examination. "It seems you're going to have a baby. I'd say late summer or early fall." Tessa sat in stunned silence as the news sank in. A baby. Isaac's child growing inside her. Joy and fear mingled in equal measure, joy at the new life they'd created, fear at the memories of Isaac's lost son. When she told Isaac that evening after Dr. Pearson had gone, she watched his face carefully for any sign of distress. Instead, she saw wonder bloom in his eyes, followed by tears he made no attempt to hide. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy about this?" Tessa asked hesitantly. "I know it brings back nothing but the knowledge that life goes on," Isaac said firmly. "That love continues and grows in new directions." He pulled her into his arms. "This is a blessing, Tessa, a testament to our love and our future." The news accelerated their wedding plans. Neither wanted to wait until spring, preferring to be properly married before the baby began to show. With Elizabeth's health stable enough for travel, arrangements were made for a small ceremony in Tonopah in mid-March. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with a hint of spring in the air. Tessa wore the dress Elizabeth had lovingly created, cream-colored cotton with lace trim, simple but elegant. Isaac had arranged for them to be married in the small church, rather than by the justice of the peace, wanting to give Tessa the proper ceremony she deserved. As Miguel escorted her down the aisle toward Isaac, who stood tall and handsome in a new black suit, Tessa felt as though she were floating. Elizabeth watched proudly from the front pew, her eyes bright with happy tears. Consuela sat beside her, dabbing at her own eyes, while the ranch hands filled the remaining seats, unusually clean and uncomfortable in their Sunday best. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice echoing in the small church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Isaac slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady and sure. "With this ring I thee wed," he promised, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the church. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister concluded, You may kiss your bride." Isaac's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. As they turned to face their small congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Isaac Xavier, Tessa felt a sense of completion she had never known before. The celebration afterward at the hotel dining room was joyful, with food, music, and dancing. Sheriff Cooper attended, raising a toast to the couple he'd helped bring together. Even Vivian made a brief appearance, presenting Tessa with a small silver hairbrush as a wedding gift before slipping away. That night, in the hotel's best room, Isaac and Tessa consummated their marriage with a passion born of deep love and mutual respect. As they lay together afterward, his hand protectively covering the place where their child grew, Tessa marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Xavier?" Isaac murmured, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "That I never imagined such happiness was possible," she admitted. "A year ago I was desperate and afraid, with no future I could see beyond the next day. And now—" Tessa turned in his arms to face him, tracing the beloved contours of his face. "Now I see our whole lives stretching before us, this ranch, our children, growing old together. It's more than I ever dared to dream." "It's what you deserve," Isaac said simply. "What we both deserve after the hardships we've faced." They returned to the ranch the next day as husband and wife. Tessa moved her belongings into Isaac's bedroom, their bedroom now, while Elizabeth remained in the cabin, insisting the newlyweds needed their privacy. Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the pastures, foals in the stables, and the gradual rounding of Tessa's belly. By June, there was no hiding her condition, though she continued her daily activities with only minor adjustments, now managing the household as its mistress rather than its servant. One warm evening in July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Isaac placed his hand on Tessa's now prominent belly and felt a strong kick. "Active little one," he chuckled. "Like its father," Tessa replied, covering his hand with hers. "Always in motion." Isaac's expression grew serious. "I've been thinking about names." "Have you? So have I. If it's a boy," Isaac said hesitantly, "I'd like to name him after your father." "What was his name?" Tessa blinked back sudden tears at his thoughtfulness. "James. His name was James." "James Xavier," Isaac tested the name. "It's a good, strong name." "And if it's a girl," Isaac smiled softly. "I thought perhaps Elizabeth, after your mother." "Elizabeth Caroline," Tessa suggested, watching his face carefully, "to honor both our mothers." Isaac's eyes shimmered with emotion as he nodded. "Perfect." August brought suffocating heat and the final uncomfortable weeks of pregnancy. Elizabeth, whose health had stabilized though never fully recovered, spent hours knitting tiny garments and preparing for her grandchild. The entire ranch seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. On September 3, 1879, after a long and difficult labor, James Thomas Xavier entered the world with a lusty cry that immediately endeared him to everyone who heard it. Dr. Pearson, who had arrived just in time to deliver the baby, pronounced him a fine, healthy boy with a good set of lungs. When Isaac held his son for the first time, the complex emotions that crossed his face spoke volumes: grief for the child he had lost, joy for the new life in his arms, and overwhelming love for the woman who had given him this second chance at fatherhood. "He has your eyes," Tessa said wearily from the bed, watching her husband cradle their newborn. "And your determination," Isaac replied with a watery smile. "Dr. Pearson says he's never seen a baby fight his way into the world with such persistence. May I see him?" Elizabeth asked from the doorway, where Miguel had wheeled her in to meet her grandson. Isaac carefully placed the baby in his grandmother's arms. Elizabeth looked down at the tiny face with wonder. "He's perfect," she whispered. Absolutely perfect. Life settled into a new rhythm centered around young James, who grew quickly and showed early signs of his father's love for horses and his mother's gentle spirit. The Xavier Ranch prospered under Isaac and Tessa's joint management, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine horses and fair business practices. Elizabeth lived to see her grandson's second birthday before her weakened lungs finally failed her. She passed peacefully in her sleep, having told Tessa the day before, "I've lived to see everything I hoped for you, my darling girl. You found a good man, gave me a beautiful grandson, and built a life to be proud of." Her death, though expected, hit Tessa hard. Isaac was her rock during those difficult days, supporting her through grief while ensuring the ranch continued to function, and young James was cared for. In the spring following Elizabeth's death, Tessa discovered she was expecting their second child. The news brought healing and renewed purpose. When Elizabeth Caroline Xavier was born in November 1882, her arrival seemed to close the circle of loss and renewal that had defined their family's journey. "Look at her, Isaac," Tessa said as they admired their daughter, who had her father's black hair and her mother's delicate features. "She's a new beginning." "Every day with you has been a new beginning," Isaac replied, his arm around his wife, their son leaning against his leg. "From that first moment you served me whiskey at the Lucky Strike." Tessa laughed softly. "You said I didn't belong there. You didn't. You belonged here with me." Isaac kissed her gently. "Always with me." 10 years later, the Xavier Ranch had grown considerably, now encompassing twice its original acreage. 3 more children had joined the family: William Michael in 1884, Sarah Grace in 1886, and Robert James in 1889. The original cabin where Tessa and Elizabeth had first lived had been expanded into a schoolhouse where Tessa taught their children, and several from neighboring ranches. On a golden autumn afternoon in 1892, as they celebrated their 13th wedding anniversary with a family picnic by the pond where they'd shared their first kiss, Tessa watched Isaac teaching 8-year-old William to skip stones across the water while 13-year-old James helped his younger siblings build a leaf fort. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Xavier," Isaac said, coming to sit beside her on the blanket after William ran off to join his siblings. "I was thinking about choices," Tessa replied, leaning against his shoulder. "How the most desperate choice I ever made working at that saloon led me to the best choice I ever made trusting you." Isaac's arm tightened around her. At 45, his black hair was now streaked with silver, but his blue eyes were as vibrant as ever, especially when they looked at her. "I think about that too, how close we both came to missing this life. You ever regret it? Taking a chance on a saloon girl with nothing to offer but determination and a sick mother?" Isaac turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Tessa Xavier, in 15 years you have never asked a more foolish question." His face softened into the smile that still made her heart skip. "You had everything to offer: courage, intelligence, compassion, and a heart capable of extraordinary love. I am the fortunate one in this marriage, make no mistake." "I think we're both fortunate," Tessa said, watching as their children's laughter echoed across the water. "More than I ever dreamed possible when I stood in that saloon doorway all those years ago." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber, Isaac pulled Tessa to her feet. "Dance with me," he said simply. "There's no music," she protested with a laugh. "We don't need any." And so they danced beside the pond, watched by their curious and giggling children, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life rich with love, respect, and joy. "I love you, Isaac Xavier," Tessa whispered against his chest. "Today and always." "And I love you, Tessa Xavier," he replied, his voice deep and certain. Today, always, and forever. The future stretched before them, not without challenges or sorrows, but faced together, as they had faced everything since that fateful day when a desperate saloon girl had served whiskey to a lonely rancher, and both their lives had changed forever.